package just came in.
Get everybody out of here.
Play me.
Hello, Detective Banks. Do you know where your officers are?
Jigsaw?
Wait, I thought the Jigsaw killer was dead.
He is.
Find him. They're hours, not days.
How can I catch this guy? If there's nobody on the force, I can trust!
You can't do this alone.
Whoever did this has another motive. Something personal.
When was the last time you saw your father?
Jigsaw copycat. This is gonna go sideways fast.
I'm a spin like a spiral.
All available units, officer down.
That was just a diversion to get us out of the precinct! I need everyone on this case! He could be anyone. He could be anyone. We're gonna tear this city apart.
I'm a spin like a spiral.
Hello, Detective Banks. When was the last time you saw your father?
Hey folks, James McDonald here with IrishFilmCritic.com, and today we're going to be speaking with Darren Bousman, the director of the new horror movie Spiral, and also Josh Stolberg, one of the writers of the movie. Guys, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's been 11 years since the original Saw franchise ended, and 4 years since Jigsaw, and fans have been waiting very patiently for a new installment, which they now have. How did you guys get involved in the project? Did you reach out to Lionsgate and say, hey, we've got a great idea for a new movie, or did they contact you guys?
Well, I was writing a totally different Saw film at the time that was supposed to fit into the first 7. And out of the blue, got a phone call from the producers, Mark Berg and Oren Kulis, and they said, hey, Chris, stay by your phones. Chris Rock is going to call you any minute. He wants to do a Saw film.
Right.
And they hung up, and I was like, this is a joke. This makes no sense. And Chris called and immediately launched into why he loves the franchise, why he loves Saw films, why he loves the horror genre. And that was the start. And together, we started crafting the story. And then as soon as the first draft was written, they were trying to figure out who was going to direct this thing. And there was no other person that made any sense at all other than Darren.
Right.
Yeah, it was, it's been 14 years since I did my last Saw film, and I thought it was over and done. At that point, I thought I had done everything I could do. I had 3 #1 openings. I killed a lot of people, you know.
Right.
And I was like, what? In
the movies and...
in the movie. Good.
And then, but you get a call from Chris Rock, and you're like, okay, I have not done everything. I've not directed a Chris Rock version of Saw.
Right.
And that was it. I just got the phone call, and I was like, okay, yes, if Chris Rock is doing it, the answer is yes.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you is, but it's been a long time since you did the first, or 2, 3, and 4. What was it like for you returning after all these years?
It felt, in a lot of respects, like my first film all over again, because there was so much pressure and anxiety after being gone for so long, realizing the fan base continued to grow, and there was expectations of my return. When I did Saw 2, no one knew who I was. And so there was no pressure really for me. Saw was not as big as it was. So coming back now, 14 years later, the fan base has quadrupled. And I think that I became, one of the people that helped steer the ship early on. And so I think that while I didn't birth it, maybe I was Saw's godfather or something because James Wan made it. So I think there was a lot of pressure coming back this time, and specifically working with 2 titans like Chris Rock and Samuel Jackson, and then the prestige of someone like a Max Minghella, who, who's a filmmaker. And by the way, I do musicals, and his first movie was a musical, so I look up to someone like Max Minghella as well.
Right.
So I think that there was such pressure that I wasn't expecting coming in.
Right.
We also knew that we were making a film that was going to contain the DNA of the Saw franchise, but was going to have a very, very different look to it. And part of that was eliminating some of the tropes of the previous films, like the Billy Doll, like John Kramer, like The Voice, all of those things. And the film was going to look very different. And Darren was actually part of keeping the DNA of Saw together, because he really did, he steered the ship during those first, 4 formidable years.
Right.
So it was really important to have him to keep that Saw, what do you want to call it? Vibe, just the vibe going. Yeah.
Well, that was another question I was going to ask you guys. I always felt the earlier movies concentrated more on story, the characters, and of course the traps. Not so much on star power, even though the first couple of movies had Danny Glover, Cary Elwes, Donnie Wahlberg. How did you guys get Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson involved in this project?
That was, again, it's one of those things that everything just fell in place very quickly. We asked. That was, and we paid a lot of money. No, I'm joking. I don't know if we got paid. No, I think that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and I think that Chris came to Mark and Oren, who were the producers, and then Chris mentioned Samuel L. Jackson. I remember I probably insulted Chris Rock when I said this, but he goes, "What do you guys think about Samuel L. Jackson?" And I go, "He's never going to make a Saw movie." In the same respect, Chris Rock should never make a Saw movie. So they called Samuel Jackson, and he said yes. So it was that easy and that crazy.
Well, the predecessors are filled with, obviously, the blood-soaked traps.
Yeah.
How do you guys come up with all these creative ways to kill people? Do you sit in a room and throw ideas and hope something just sticks?
It takes months of sitting in rooms throwing shit, because either we come up with a great idea, forgetting that it was actually done 7 years prior in another Saw movie. You want to talk about how?
Well, yeah. The great thing about making these films is the marching orders from both the studio Lionsgate and the producers Mark and Oren is always, don't think about the trap shit. Let's get the story in place. Let's get the characters in place. Let's really, really hone it to make sure it's crisp and clean. And then when you start making those traps, you get to bring in all of these people, men and women, who are like toy makers for demented people. And those traps are created by all of us together, and it's really exciting. It's like, just sit around a table and say, all right, well, how are we going to get it? How would you rip a tongue out of a mouth if you had to?
That first one, I was cringing. I was in the theater going, I can feel that.
Well, it was also kind of cool. We had the VIP and Who's Who. It's like the Disney Imagineers of the Saw universe. We brought back in David Hackle, who directed one of the Saw films, I think Saw 5. And David Hackle was my production designer on 2, 3, and 4 and helped create the traps. So David Hackle was brought in for a few weeks. And then we brought in Kevin Greutert once the traps were actually shot the first time, to help us maintain that signature trap look. And Kevin Greutert was one of the editors as well as the director of 6, 7, and 8? 6 and 7?
7. Yeah, 6 and 7.
6 and 7. So I think that Mark and Oren and Lionsgate are very superstitious in that keeping that core team. And I think that part of the DNA of the Saw universe is the actual DNA of the filmmakers part of it, whether it be Charlie Clouser's music, who has been that one consistent, or the trap design by David Hackle. I think there's always that consistency that flows through, even though cast changes, even though people change, there's still those core people.
Right. Then one last question. Depending on the success of Spiral at the box office, if it made enough money and Lionsgate say, hey, we're going to do a sequel, and they reached out to you guys, hey, do you want to come back and do a part 2? Would you be open to that? Or do you have any other projects you're working on that you can share with us?
Well, yes, I would absolutely come back. And I think that, in the same way that when I was able to do Saw 2, I immediately wanted to do Saw 3, because I found myself reinvigorated. And I think that I'm reinvigorated in this universe and working with Lionsgate. When I did the first films, I was in my 20s. I was a brat. I was just like, now in my 40s, with a family and kids, my outlooks have changed. And I think that working this time with the studio that supports the filmmakers, that supported us, working with this cast, working with Joshua, I would absolutely come back.
And you're talking about a franchise that is so storied. It reinvigorated horror films. How
Right.
could you say no to
No.
that?
Right.
You know, I don't want to say this, but you know, I'd come back to be the craft service guy.
Right.
Just because I love being on the set. I
Right.
love these people. I love the family. It's a
Yeah.
real family atmosphere.
Right. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your
I
time.
appreciate it. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.